Hello, this is Chapter 19, the Industrial Revolution Overview Net. We move into a new section of the course today called Convulsions, 1750 to 1914. In this chapter, Chapter 19, we're doing an overview of industrialization, looking at new tools, new power, and new systems of economic organization, particularly capitalism. In the next chapter, Chapter 20, we'll look at how a few countries use the surge that industrialization gave them to go tramping around all over the world and claiming other countries as their own, this movement called imperialism that you will no doubt have heard about. And so Chapter 21 will look at the events of this period from the perspective of the imperial colonizers, and Chapter 22 will look at it from the perspective of the colonized. Okay, so it just gives you some idea of where we're going. Chapters 20, 21, 22 will be next week's work. We also have a film next week about the Industrial Revolution, a Charlie Chaplin film. Okay, so we begin as always with our framing the argument points. And what we're looking at in this chapter, Chapter 19, is the way in which the specific shape of the British hierarchy and its peculiar odd cultural frame, as we've said before, worked within the global network of exchange and allowed industrialization to happen first in Britain. What was special about Britain, and special not necessarily meaning better, just peculiar or odd. Moving on to look at the global impact over the last 2 centuries of the industrialization on economics and demographics, and how this ended this late agrarian, or this movement that had been happening all through the agrarian period. We talked about it mainly in reference to the late agrarian, of low and slow. Low production and slow communications. This changes with industrialization. And then lastly, we're going to look at the economic culture of capitalism and how this shaped industrialization and its spread through the global network. And I've added a video to our lineup for today that looks at the impact of capitalism on the US and the disparity between the poor and the rich in the US, and how that's grown actually in the last 30 years. So how this will show you how capitalism continues to be relevant and continues to have this effect of concentrating wealth in the hands of the very rich. Okay, so let's take a look at our map for today and think about our primary sources that we'll be reading. So our first primary source, bang, Great Britain, looking at the patent on the steam engine that was designed by James Watt. One of the constraints on agrarian society was power. Power had to be supplied either by wind or water or by muscle, whether that was human muscle or animal muscle. But developing a system that provided power by another means allows industrialization to happen. The second source that we're looking at actually comes from Scotland, but again, still within Great Britain for now. That might all change soon. Andrew wrote The Philosophy of Manufactures in 1835, and he was a scholar of technology, but also had a vast array of interests besides that. And his study into technology and factory conditions shows his interests in people's welfare, and he definitely sees kind of a rosy side of industrialization. He's a big fan of technology, and he sees workers' lives as improving. You'll read other sources that are not so positive about this improvement on workers' lives that come from industrialization, such as our next source, the Communist Party Manifesto of 1848, written by Karl Marx, a German philosopher and economist, and his English collaborator, Friedrich Engels. Engels also had published a lot of things on the conditions of the working poor, particularly housing and urban conditions. So he was, both were very interested from a sort of a humanist point of view and an economist point of view about what was happening with industrialization. So Marx has this theory of history that it kind of works in repeated cycles. When those at the bottom are very, very oppressed, they will rise up and overthrow those people on top, that they will rebel. And his expectation is that this will happen with the mass of industrial workers as they're exploited by capitalist industry. Okay, so those are our readings for today. This is a picture of James Watt's steam engine, and this is probably going to be the worst explanation of how a steam engine works you've ever had. But you heat a fuel, and this boils water, and the steam of the water is under pressure, and the pressure can force up this valve here. The pressure of the steam forces up this valve. This makes this go down. You release the pressure a bit, it goes down again, and this acts as a crank. Oh dear, that's all my others. There we go. Acts as a crank and turns the wheel. Okay, so you have movement from. Maybe very good. But that movement, when you it can be used for all kinds of things, such as Stephenson's rocket here, which is one of the first trains, and eventually. Sort of linking this to where we're going to go in next week, when these railways are brought to places like India, they become a tool of imperialism as well. Okay, so let's not forget our patterns and principles for this week. Industrialization accelerated the long-term trend that saw networks increase in importance relative to hierarchies. And if you think about today's world, yes, our hierarchies are still there. They haven't really gone away. They are very differently shaped. But our networks have increasingly become more and more important, even in your lifetimes. And this is something that starts to happen in the period of industrialization beginning in 1750. In the agrarian era, power led to wealth. In the industrial era, wealth leads to power. I think we've talked about this principle before. Okay, so one of the principles, as I said, of the agrarian era was low and slow, low production, slow communications. When we start to think about what was special about England, already it's sort of chipping away at some of these agrarian patterns. So this is a painting of the development of the English stagecoach. Certainly not as fast as a steam train, but it's getting there, and it's creating the desire for faster and faster movement. So when we think about the origins of industrialization in England, we have to think about these things that are forerunners. Also, what you're looking at here is a map from 1747 of Exchange Alley, an area in London where the stock exchange and insurance companies are located. And interestingly, these grow up around an area that was very impacted by another network connection. That's the importation of coffee into England. The English went mad for coffee, set up coffee houses, and it's around these coffee houses where people would sit and get a little tweaked on their coffee during the day that people started to set up their business centres. So it's kind of the reverse of what happens nowadays, where Starbucks sets up where things are already established. Establishing something like a Starbucks sets up the leading financial institutions. Okay, so England has this exchange. And the reason it needs this exchange is because it's already very, very involved in a mature and well-developed network of world trade. It has colonies in the Caribbean, in Canada, in India, had them at 1747 anyway, in North America, in what is currently the US and the colonies there, and also out in Indonesia as well. So this network, which just increases for Britain as it gets more and more industrial power, is really driving this. So a lot of the money that goes into funding early industrialization comes from the British profits on the sugar and slave trades. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the influx of wealth into Britain last week and the peculiar political structure of Britain. Britain also had several significant resources to start off with. It had this economic system we've talked about. It had labor. Labor was freeing up as agriculture became more and more efficient. There was this pool of labor, and it had some natural resources, fast flowing, lots and lots of water. We're pretty good on rain in Britain, and so lots and lots of fast flowing streams which could drive water wheels even before we're starting to look at the development of steam. The one thing that Britain didn't have, interestingly enough, is cotton inside Britain. And this is interesting because cotton becomes the major industrial product of Britain. So where is it getting its cotton from? It's getting its cotton from India. It's being imported as raw cotton, and the first industrial machines like this Arkwright's water frame here are involved in taking some of the labour out of the production of cotton cloth. Now, you would think that people would be a little uneasy about labour-saving devices, and they certainly were from both ends of the spectrum. From the point of view of elites get where they are by being controllers of human labour. And if you take away that human labour or change that human labour, it has the knock-on effect of changing the power of the elites, of the nobles, and it does do this. So they have every right to be a little concerned about it. But a lot of those elites start making their money in industry. So that sort of ameliorates that. The other thing that happens at this time that ameliorates this is the publication of The Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith in 1776. And he talks about doing away with this mercantilist system of economics or way of thinking about economics that I talked about last week. And this is that there's a fixed proportion of world trade, and it's a country's job to go out there and try to maximize its exports while minimizing its imports. Now, Adam Smith comes up with the idea that markets can grow. They're not just fixed. And that there's this invisible hand which is demand, which powers a market. It's not just a fixed commodity. And so this new thinking allows some leniency on the old mercantilist way of thinking, and people are more and more willing to invest in markets that can expand. Okay, so let's look at the process of industrialization. So in the first stage, between 1770 and 1870, a long period of time, it's pretty much Britain, with slightly lesser showings by Belgium and New England. So what we're looking at here are textile industries, like I said, but also the development of better communications from steam power, steamships, the railways, etc. In the second stage of industrialization, we start to have other countries added. The US, Germany, Japan, France, Belgium becomes a fully competing industrialized country as well, and a little more limited in Spain, Italy, Austria, Russia, and Argentina. So I'm looking at my lists off to the side. So in this stage, capitalism spreads via investment, both privately owned investment and some state investment as well. We start to see the development of heavy industries and chemical industries as well. And the second phase, did I say this is 1870 to 1914? The third phase is 1914 to 1970, and in this play, as you can see in green on this map, the big country that is added is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, and they are particularly interested in heavy industry, and particularly within that in military industry. And in this period, it's the United States that starts to come to the fore as an industrial country, and comes to dominate the industrial scene almost as much as Britain had in stage one. We also see a shift to lighter industry, mass production of consumer goods, and also the development of mass markets for entertainment, radios, but also sports, movies, those kinds of things. And then finally, since 1970, we see a rapid expansion globally, which is almost complete by 2000, where industrialization has impacted nearly all the world, but specifically East Asia and South Asia, the Pacific Rim, Latin America, and a little more limited in the Islamic world and in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, we're looking at a mix of private investment and state sponsorship. We're looking at a proliferation of customer-orientated industry. Vast service industry has been created, business expertise, an explosion in the entertainment industry. The largest industry in 2000, can you guess what that was? Tourism. Okay, so this shows how networked our economies now are. If tourism is the greatest, is the largest industry in 2000, but also a vast expansion in the manufacturing of cheap electronic goods to support the latest craze in digital media. Okay, so let's move on and have a little look at the impact of industrialization. Actually, let's do that in the next half. Okay, so that's the end of part 1.